Hello everyone, I am Ecem Canbazoğlu from TÜBİ. Today I'm going to lecture about the motivation and its types. Firstly, let's look at my content. Firstly, I will introduce the topic and then I will define the motivation. After that, I will introduce the types of the motivation and I will finish with the conclusion part. Let's begin with the introduction part. In the recent period of education, the aspect of language teaching and learning have changed. This focus has gone to learner-centered classroom. These days, therefore, students become more autonomous on themselves and more independent to teacher. Self-sufficiency is important for being autonomous for learners. In that situation, teacher needs to motivate the learners. Thereby, learners can participate actively in the language classroom. Hence, motivation plays a crucial role as one of the key factors that influences the rate and the success of the second or foreign language learning. Motivation is conceptualized as a set of variables. That is, it's a combination of effort and desire to achieve the goal of learning, and also a combination of the language and favorable attitudes towards learning the language. It is helpful to understand that there are different types of motivation. For this, will enable teachers to identify which approach they need to take to motivate their students according to their teaching context. I will introduce the most basic types of motivation in this presentation. Firstly, let's begin with the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Intrinsically motivated behaviors trigger internally rewarding consequences such as the feeling of competence and self-determination. Extrinsically motivated activities lead to certain rewards such as diplomas, prizes, and good marks. Even punishment can be an element, for it creates the motivation to avoid it. Extrinsic motivation is usually weaker than intrinsic due to its addictiveness and dependency. Depriving students of rewards could lead to demotivation. Some rewards, such as positive feedback from the instructor, could increase the level of self-determination. Language learners need both extrinsic motivation, which teachers have the possibility to initiate, as well as intrinsic motivation. There is a concept in the field of motivation introduced by Ryan and DC 2000 as self-determination theory, and they say that the self-determination theory categorizes and tells apart diverse types of motivation in accordance with the different rationales, causes, or targets which strengthen a deed or an achievement. In proportion to this theory, the most fundamental differences between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation is that intrinsic motivation is the willingness and interest to do and take part in some certain activities because an individual feels that they are attractive and pleasant. Students who have intrinsic motivation are inclined to stay with intricate and complicated problems and gain knowledge from their slips and mistakes. Besides, intrinsic motivation is essential and fundamental for the integration process through which elements of one's accessible internal awareness and knowledge is assimilated or mixed with new knowledge. Intrinsic motivation: do something for its inherent enjoyment or personal satisfaction, but not for separable outcomes such as trophy or prize. Extrinsic motivation is the propensity to take part in activities because of the reasons which don't link to the activity. These reasons can be the anticipation of reward or punishment, like being successful in the exam or getting a good mark. To come to the point, intrinsic motivation is a motivation to do an activity because of itself. In fact, the individuals who are intrinsically motivated do and practice the activities and works because they feel that those activities are enjoyable. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is motivation to do a work or an activity as a means or way to achieve a target. Those who are extrinsically motivated perform and do affairs as they think that their contribution will cause enviable results like a reward, teacher admiration, or prevention of punishment. Extrinsic motivation behavior is driven by external rewards such as money, fame, grades, and praise. Briefly, intrinsic motivation is a mental satisfaction which is achieved by others' praise, while extrinsic motivation is an incentive activated by external factors such as good marks and getting reward. Knowing about these types of motivation will be useful for language teachers as the level of intrinsic or extrinsic motivation differs depending on the student. For instance, one can say pre-sessional students are extrinsically motivated by the final exams. In that case, how can teachers increase their intrinsic motivation? In contrast, some foreign language courses without credits or certificates need a different approach because of their shortage of extrinsic motivation. For the teacher and learner, in fact, it is essential and important for the teacher to know what type of motivation is and how it is formed, captured, and finally displayed in the learner. Both intrinsic and extrinsic motivations can have two subgroups that can activate the learners. In one hand, extrovertedly intrinsic motivation means that the learner takes advantage from and feels satisfied by communicating with others. On the other hand, introvertedly, the learner uses language for meditation and personal thinking as well as personal activities and affairs. Indeed, rely on intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, and for creating and developing either of them, the teacher should make the classroom quiet and without any anxiety. Providing educational and academic advantages, encouraging students, and asking simple and easy questions at the beginning of the class will increase motivation for learning. Besides, the mentioned issues will fulfill the need of progress for the learner. Here is the difference between these motivations. Themes of the motivations. Why we do what we do in these motivations. Yes, let's go on with the integrative versus instrumental motivation. Integrative motivation refers to students who wish to integrate into the target culture. If a student is instrumental motivated, his or her goals are to achieve a certain reward such as promotion or good grades. These types of motivation as orientation, for orientation is not always related to one's motivation. For instance, one can have high integrative orientation with little wish to learn the target language. Integrative and instrumental orientation don't have to be thought of as mutually exclusive, as a student can have the urge to obtain good grades and at the same time want to integrate into the target society. The integrative motivation means learning the language with the intention of participating in the culture of its people, and instrumental motivation suggests and implies that the learner learns the language in support of a purpose relating to occupation or further useful motive. These two types of motivation can affect and control the procedure and outcome of learning. Cook further believes that the integrative and instrumental motivation suggested by Gardner and Lambert is useful and effective factor for second language learning. Gardner and Ellis also introduced mentioned types of motivation. The former occurs when the student likes to join or be a member of the certain crowd and culture. The latter crops up when the learner anticipates numerous benefits that he proposes to have while learning some particular language. Comparing these two types of motivation with each other, Alice believes that the best and the perfect motivation is the integrative motivation. He believes that integrative motivation is more competent and well organized. Students who don't have instrumental or integrative motivation, in fact, will face with problems and difficulties to learn and gain knowledge of a second language in the classroom, and generally, learning the language would be difficult for them. Instrumental motivation, task or goal oriented and always look ahead and outside. And it will set and pursue goals and objectives more than anything else. Routine will be their number one enemy. The perfect driving force when looking to expand, grow, or disseminate. A must in entrepreneurs and visionaries, no company can grow without it. Integrative motivation, permanence and stability, always looks inside. and it will strengthen the company's values and philosophy and will seek every opportunity to create greater internal cohesion and team spirit. Risk will be their number one enemy, the perfect force when stabilizing a new company or in situations of crisis. Basic in departments seeking to consolidate the company, human resources, accounting, and so on. For the teacher and learner, sometimes motivation is an instrument for the student. In this sense, the learner uses, for example, English language in order to fulfill his need. The teacher should know that English language as an instrument should have the worth of attempt for the learner. The aims of the instrumental motivation are to become aware of and realize the value of the learner who thinks about. English language as an instrument for reaching a particular goal such as achieving grades or passing examination. Additionally, intrinsic motivation causes the learners to think that whether learning a specific issue is worth of effort and attempt or not. That is, if the learner in his judgment comes to the conclusion that learning a language is not worthy or does not have functional value, he becomes disappointed and gives up learning the language. Here is the table of the types of the motivation. Let's conclude it. The above discussion reveals that motivation is a very important and effective factor in the field of learning language. Thus, the language teachers and lecturers should discover, realize, and pay attention to the personality of their students. Moreover, they should be aware of motivation, its high importance, and its types. They should also realize and get familiar with the character as well as the personality of each student. Afterwards, according to that specific personality type, they should identify and recognize the form of motivation relating to that and perform it in their teaching process. In this case, they can have practical, useful, and effective language classroom in addition to a positive outcome in their teaching context. My wrap-up questions: what is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation? What is the instrumental motivation? What is the integrative motivation? Here is my references. Thanks for listening.